girlfriend, F26, blindsided me and believes that breaking up is for the best M27, citing her mental health, depressive episodes, and life stressors. Is it worth waiting around for her to figure things out? For context, I met my girlfriend about 6 months ago on a random outing at the bars. I pursued her intensely, despite her being apprehensive due to hearing rumors that I was still involved with my previous ex at the time, which were not true. Eventually, with my consistent support, she fell for me. This was her first relationship, and my first after a toxic 3.5-year on-and-off relationship, so I was mostly teaching her the ropes. Initially, things were quite solid, although I felt the need to guide her through the relationship to ensure she felt secure. Early on, there were instances where she would avoid speaking affectionately in front of her friends, and if I mentioned something sweet she had done in their presence, she would downplay it since they had never seen that side of her before. She met this same group of friends on the same day she met me, and they quickly became best friends. We had occasional disagreements, but nothing serious, just minor quarrels or moments of irritability, but we would resolve them almost immediately with no problem. A lot of it was simply us learning to communicate effectively with each other. We traveled together, spent time with each other's families, and things were rapidly blossoming. I honestly envisioned a future with her, albeit it was very early in our relationship. About a month ago, she moved from one apartment to another, and everything seemed to unravel. She was already under stress from her sister being diagnosed with cancer. Although very treatable, she was understandably still stressed, and I did my best to always support her. This is when her mental health began to deteriorate. It took almost 2 weeks to relocate everything from her old apartment to her new one and to get everything organized. I spent several days a week helping her, transporting items from place to place, among other tasks. She would have multiple crying spells each day or mental breakdowns, as she referred to them, over the smallest things. Eventually, these issues escalated to larger concerns, such as work stress, her schedule being disrupted, me making a joke she did not appreciate, and her feeling insecure about our relationship, thinking I could leave and break her heart at any moment. About 2 weeks ago, she had to wake up at 7 a.m. for work. While I needed to wake up at 8 a.m., she became frustrated and cranky, starting an argument with me because I got to sleep in while she did not, and it felt unfair to her. She claimed on some days that I was the reason she got out of bed so late. I do not have to be in the office until 10 a.m., while she is required to be there by 9 a.m. because she did not want to get out of bed without me. This only occurred a couple of times, but it was significant enough for her to create a fuss about it. Later that week, she said we needed to spend fewer nights together during the week so that we could realign our schedules. She desired to wake up at 6 a.m., work out, and be in bed by 9 p.m. each night, while I am often in the office until 6 or 7 p.m., followed by a gym session, which disrupted her routine. She felt the need to adjust her schedule to regain a sense of sanity, as she put it. Although she expressed a desire to cut back on our nights together, she still wanted to see me almost every other night for tasks like hanging curtains for her since she did not want to use the step stool, hanging pictures, assembling her bedside table, or simply to see my face because she was having a bad day. I did not mind helping her because she was my girlfriend, and I wanted to alleviate her stress and anxiety. However, this left me with almost no time to focus on adjusting my own schedule. 2 weekends ago, we planned to stay in, and she was going to cook dinner while we drank wine and watched a show. She was going out with her girlfriends for happy hour while I wrapped up at the office and went to the gym. Around 7 p.m., while I was finishing up at the gym, I received a call from her telling me that she and her friends were going to another bar. About an hour later, I got a call from her friend asking me to come. They were all clearly inebriated at this point. I got home, took a shower, and then received a call from my ex asking me to join her and her friend and the friend's date at a restaurant. I could tell my ex was drunk. When she reaches a certain level, it's evident, and she is no longer enjoyable to be around. Since we already had plans, I decided to meet them at the restaurant for another drink. At the restaurant, she was a bit rude and standoffish, and when it clearly frustrated me, she kept pressing for what was wrong, seemingly unaware of our earlier conversations. Her apartment was within walking distance from the restaurant, and this is when everything went downhill. During the walk back, she yelled at me for arriving at the restaurant late, completely overlooking the fact that we had plans earlier that night that she had disregarded. Once we arrived at her apartment, she began rambling about various topics, talking about people being present who were not there. When she went to pour a glass of wine and I asked what she was doing, she replied that she was getting wine for the others. She yelled at me, slammed doors, tossed items around her apartment, cursed at me, and at one point stormed out of her apartment, crying loudly in the hallway. When she cursed at me again, I reached my limit and walked to my car. She inundated my phone with calls, forgetting I was at her apartment but wanting me to return, and then she did not remember anything that occurred. The next morning, she had no recollection of the previous night, but mentioned that this was not the first time such an incident had occurred, and that these types of episodes run in her family. At one point, I genuinely believed she was having a mental breakdown, and I considered calling someone. Throughout last week, I grappled with racing thoughts concerning her drunken episode and how dreadful the entire experience was, but I continued to love her and chose to view it as an isolated incident since she had promised it would not happen again. She had an incredibly challenging week due to work pressure and the emotional turmoil from that night, experiencing crying spells regularly. Toward the end of the week, we had another argument regarding our schedules. We were supposed to see each other on Friday, but she went to get happy hour drinks with one of our mutual friends. They spent 4 to 5 hours drinking, and on their way back, they felt unsafe. I had my phone set to do not disturb while I was at the gym. My ex tried to call me, and it went to voicemail. You have to call twice when on do not disturb for it to go through. My mutual friend called me, and that call connected. Assuming something was wrong, I answered, unaware of my ex's call. They expressed feeling unsafe, and I could hear my ex rambling in the background about how I did not answer, and so on. We got into another argument that night, where she told me nothing made her feel more isolated at that moment than my not answering her, despite my repeated explanations about what occurred and why it happened. Nothing could change her mind. The following morning, she woke up irritable and took her bad mood out on me. She instructed me to text her later that day when I wanted to see her, which I did not hear her say, and I used that day to reflect on everything. I needed space after all the emotional upheaval to gather my thoughts and just be myself. I should have communicated this to her, but I failed to do so. That evening, after not speaking all day, she texted me, saying this was ridiculous and that she was done, and she stopped sharing her location with me. We engaged in a 2-hour conversation during which she expressed many hurtful things, like no normal person could manage my schedule, and that I would never be successful with it, that most of my friends were terrible and interrupted me repeatedly whenever I tried to speak. Although she acknowledged having an issue with interrupting others, but had never truly interrupted me. She repeatedly hinted at a breakup, voicing uncertainty about whether we could make things work due to our lack of communication and differing schedules, despite not allowing more than a week for us to adjust to new routines. She wanted to meet the following morning to talk, but I felt it was too soon. She then texted me the next morning, asking to meet on Tuesday at a restaurant, which I was still unsure about. She requested again to discuss things on Monday, and we essentially broke up, with her citing my delay in responding to her regarding when we should talk as a reason for ending things. She also stated that given her current situation in life, she needed to eliminate certain things, and unfortunately, despite loving me more than anything and considering me the most important person in her life as well as her best friend, she had to sever ties with me first. I have noticed several of her likes on Instagram in the past day, all focused on never settling for a low-maintenance relationship and desiring a man who plans dates first, surprises her with flowers unexpectedly, gives her love letters out of the blue, and continuously reassures her. This has crushed me. I always prioritized her, placing her mental health above my own. I was always there for her when she needed someone to lean on, never judging her, even after her drunken episode, and gave more of myself to her than I did for myself. I bought her flowers several times, some of which were surprises, given her gifts, surprised her with food, reassured her of my feelings, and always did my best to lift her spirits when she was feeling down, but it was never enough. I was genuinely falling for her, despite the tumultuous month we experienced, and felt more than I had in my previous relationship. I am stuck contemplating what might have been during this grieving process, and it is painful. I am blindsided by this breakup, and expected at least some time for us to work through our problems, especially since I was the love of her life and her best friend. She expressed intentions of a future with me and even mentioned marriage, though I understand it is early to consider that. She claimed this was the hardest decision she ever had to make and that she would not be okay for a long time. She never gave us a chance, and that is what tears me apart. Should I wait for her? Or should I move on? I know I could have organized more dates this month and perhaps been even more supportive, but it was challenging to always put her issues first. I got into a car accident last month, sustaining injuries and totaling my car, so I had plenty on my plate, yet I still prioritized her. Summary: my girlfriend blindsided me, citing her mental state, depressive episodes, and life feeling out of balance. She has been posting cryptic messages about never accepting low effort again, just because I took a day or two to reflect on our situation, and how she deserves someone who prioritizes her, even though I always did.